Muito bom dia, pessoal. Sejam bem-vindos a mais uma transmissão em nosso canal WillPTV. Hoje é 3 de janeiro de 2024 e no horário de Brasília agora são 24 minutos. Estamos então iniciando aí nosso primeiro lançamento aí do Falcon 9 este ano de 2024 aí da Spacex. Bom dia. E hoje então esse lançamento da Falcon 9, né, está sendo aí lá na base em Vandenberg, na Califórnia. Hoje com 21 satélites Starlink do grupo 79, né? Este grupo 79, então, é um grupo especial aí de satélites Starlink. Por quê? Porque então esse grupo de satélites Starlink vai dar então o início aí para os dispositivos móveis, né? Então aí os dispositivos móveis agora também poderão futuramente então acessar o Starlink, né, sem precisar aí do modem, né, igual como a gente usa o 4G, né, o 5G, né? Então aí o Starlink agora então aí já vai começar a fazer então aí seus pacotes móveis, né, sem precisar então aí utilizar o modem, né, por perto. É por isso que a live então vai começar aí dentro de instantes, né, porque vai ter toda a explicação aí de como vai funcionar, né, esse novo sistema então aí do Starlink aí pela SpaceX, né, dentro de instantes. Então estaremos iniciando a nossa transmissão em conjunto com a Vandenberg na Califórnia. Lembrando que também para hoje, né, dia 3 de janeiro, né, a partir então das 18, deixa eu ver só confirmar o horário aqui. Também hoje, dia 3 de janeiro, vamos ter aí a missão Horizon 3, né? Que é um satélite aí de comunicação, aí geossincrônico, né? E vamos ter aí transmissão a partir das 19h45 da noite no horário de Brasília. Então aí duas missões do dia de hoje. Lembrando que para saber mais aí sobre a nossa programação, basta então acessar aí as nossas redes sociais, no Twitter, né, no X e também no Instagram, né? Os links estão abaixo aí na descrição do nosso canal. E lembrando também, né, que ainda não se inscreveu no nosso canal, se inscreva, né? Deixa o like aí na transmissão e compartilhe também, né? Já estamos aí nos aproximando de 930 inscritos no canal, né? Pouco a pouco, então aí estamos chegando nos 1000. E vamos ver então como é esta missão de hoje, né? O horário de lançamento então está previsto para acontecer à meia-noite e 44 no horário de Brasília, então no dia 3 de janeiro, né? Como eu falei, então o lançamento é na base do Vandenberg, na Califórnia, no complexo de lançamento 4E. E se caso então der algum problema aí, né, nova oportunidade será para o dia 3 de janeiro, com lançamento aí para as 10h51 no horário de Brasília, esse caso der algum problema hoje, né? E o primeiro estágio então deste Falcon 9 de hoje, né, é o primeiro lançamento que ele vai realizar hoje, né? Então esse é o primeiro lançamento deste primeiro estágio do Falcon 9, tá? E o pouso então deste primeiro estágio vai ser realizado então na balsa que já está posicionada no Oceano Pacífico. E o tempo de duração desta missão é de 1 hora, 2 minutos e 30 segundos. Já estamos ao vivo então aí com a nossa transmissão em conjunto com a SpaceX. Vamos lá. Então já estamos aí com a nossa transmissão iniciando agora com a SpaceX pelo horário de Brasília, 29 minutos. Lembrando que para ainda este mês de janeiro vamos ter aí a missão Axioma 3 e também aí teremos o teste de lançamento aí com o Vulcan da United Launch, alianças para o dia 8 de janeiro, semana que vem. E ainda esta semana iremos ter aí mais uma missão Starlink, né, que foi aí programada para o dia 5 de janeiro. E nossa transmissão iniciando aí em conjunto com a Spacex, neste momento aí, a missão Starlink. Do grupo 7-9. Hoje ao todo, então, são 21 satélites que serão lançados aí pelo Falcon 9. 30 minutos no horário de Brasília, do dia 3 de janeiro. Primeiro lançamento do Falcon 9 este ano, em 2024. E aí, portanto, 14 minutos para o lançamento. Estamos em Vandenberg, na Califórnia. Só vou ajeitar aqui nosso cronômetro.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX.
And I'm Jessie Anderson, a Manufacturing Engineering Manager, and we will be your host for today's launch of 15 Starlink V2 Minis that will add to our growing constellation, providing reliable, high-speed internet around the world.
To date, Starlink has completed more than 100 launches, putting more than 5,000 satellites in orbit. But today's Starlink launch is a little bit different. In addition to our standard broadband satellites, we're also launching 6 of our first ever direct-to-cell satellites capable of connecting directly to your cell phone. This is really cool, and we'll be talking about it more later in the show.
It's hard to believe that it was just 3 years ago when Starlink launched the Better Than Nothing beta service for our first paying customers in the United States. And today, Starlink is providing high-speed, low-latency internet to more than 2.3 million households and organizations in over 70 countries and many markets around the world, spanning all 7 continents and oceans.
And what's really cool is Starlink now delivers service to more customers than any other satellite internet service provider in the world. As you can see from these photos featured on stories.starlink.com, Starlink is able to quickly deploy to locations where quality internet access has been unreliable or completely unavailable.
And so many people in the hardest to reach areas of the world are now getting online, some for the first time ever. This means critical access to resources we often take for granted, like virtual healthcare and education. If you're using Starlink in a unique or interesting way, be sure to share your story with us at stories.starlink.com.
As I mentioned earlier, today we're taking Starlink a step further with the launch of our first ever satellites capable of enabling cell phone service. It's called Direct-to-Cell, and through partnerships with wireless providers like T-Mobile here in the US, you'll be able to connect using your existing cell phone, even in places that are typically out of range. Connectivity nearly everywhere.
Cellular providers using Direct-to-Cell will have reciprocal global access in all partner nations. In other words, for carriers who partner in Direct-to-Cell, their customers would stay seamlessly connected. In addition to T-Mobile in the US, these carriers include Optus in Australia, Salt in Switzerland, Rogers in Canada, One New Zealand, Entel in Chile and Peru, and KDDI in Japan.
As you can tell, this is huge. For those of us who have ever been in a place where you can't get signal, no, it can be super frustrating. Worst case, it can even mean the difference between life or death. In fact, about 90% of the Earth remains unreachable by traditional cell signals from any wireless company.
These dead zones have serious consequences for remote communities and those who travel and work off the grid. People in those areas are either left disconnected or resort to lugging around a satellite phone, which is incredibly expensive.
And pretty heavy. Starlink's direct-to-cell service will provide coverage nearly everywhere a customer can see the sky, bringing cell phone connectivity almost anywhere. And with partners like T-Mobile, we have a real chance to bring meaningful connectivity to people who need it most.
Então vamos ver pouco aí sobre a trajetória do Starlink aí da SpaceX. Lembrando como elas falaram, né? Ao todo, né, contando já com os satélites lançados no ano passado, estamos aí com pouco mais de 4.000 satélites Starlink em órbita. Só no ano passado foram lançados pouco mais de 1.900 satélites Starlink, né? Você tem como estar no nosso blog, lá no nosso blog, né? Aí nas estatísticas lá, você clica lá em 2023, aí tem lá o total de Starlink que foram lançados no ano de 2023. Lembrando que mais tarde, a partir das 19h45, teremos aí a missão Oswald 3. Também com a Spacex, lá na Flórida.
Satellites we're launching today will be used to test the service in the United States at first. Starlink's direct-to-cell capability will first enable text messaging, and then after more satellites are placed in orbit, voice and data coverage will be enabled.
Direct-to-cell will also connect to Internet of Things devices, like those used in remote areas for agriculture, environmental monitoring, and fire detection. Think about the impact on the safety around the globe, like people assisting in emergency situations, like firefighters and rescues along coastal waters. It can also help people like me who love hiking in national parks and other places where cell phones get no reception. I go there to relax and enjoy nature, so I want to stay offline. But knowing that I can connect in an emergency will provide a peace of mind for both me and my loved ones.
So let's talk about how this all works. First, we get those satellites to orbit, and that's what we're doing today. Once on orbit, the satellites will immediately connect to the Starlink constellation to provide global connectivity.
Direct-to-cell allows users to seamlessly connect to SpaceX satellites when they enter a remote area that currently has no cell service. It operates just like a mobile phone tower does on the ground, but from space. The service will work with any 4G LTE device, and most current smartphones are already compatible. So that's the latest news on Starlink's newest capability. If you want to stay up to date on direct-to-cell, go to direct.starlink.com.
And as we mentioned earlier, to enable direct-to-cell capability, we're adding new hardware to our Starlink satellites. With any changes to our satellites in orbit, SpaceX works closely with leading astronomers from around the world to better understand if there are any impacts to their observations, because we firmly believe in the importance of a natural night sky for all of us to enjoy.
While we do expect these first 6 Starlink direct-to-cell satellites to be a bit brighter than previous Starlink V2 minis, we plan to measure the brightness of the 6 and compare those measurements to our models. We'll then make adjustments to hardware and operations to honor our commitment to making our satellites as dim as possible.
Now back to today's launch. We are just about 7 minutes from liftoff. So far, everything is proceeding smoothly. We are watching the cumulus clouds overhead, and currently 70% go for launch. And while we wait, let's take a closer look at the vehicle on your screen.
Com a missão Oswald
Falcon 9
3,
is a two-stage rocket and
diretamente
also
no
happens to be the
complexo
first
de lançamento
orbital-class
40
rocket
na
capable
Carga
of
Naval
reflight.
Flórida, nos Estados
Falcon 9
Unidos.
stands about 230 feet tall, which is almost as tall as the
Este
Taj
então é o
Mahal in
primeiro
India,
lançamento
and it's named after the
aí
Millennium
do ano
Falcon
então de
from Star
2024
Wars.
da SpaceX.
The first stage, which is the tallest portion of the vehicle, provides 1.7 million pounds of thrust
Lembrando
thanks
que
to
você
its
também pode
9 Merlin
acompanhar a nossa
M1D engines.
programação e
And actually,
atualização
the number 9
tanto no
in
nosso
Falcon
blog
9 refers to those
e
9
também no
M1D engines
nosso
on the first
Twitter.
stage, but there are actually 10 engines on the rocket.
Lembrando que esta missão, né,
The second
aí quem
stage
está
has
acompanhando
that
o nosso
10th
canal,
engine.
era para
That 10th
load
engine, which
que
is
foi
the Merlin
concluído, o
vacuum
abastecimento
or
com o
MVAC
propelente.
engine. This engine is
Lembrando
similar
que
to a
esta
first
missão,
stage
né, do
M1D engine,
79,
but
que
has
era
more
para ter sido
redundancies as
lançado
well as a
ano
larger
passado,
nozzle
né, mas
that
com
allows
tantos
the second stage to
problemas
perform in
climáticos
the
que estava
vacuum
tendo
of
na
space.
Califórnia, né?
The first stage is what
Aí
gets us out
acabou
of the Earth's atmosphere
adiando
and into
tantas
space,
vezes.
and the second stage takes all the
Aí
satellites
chegando
to
então no
their
dia de
targeted
hoje,
drop-off
né,
orbit.
aí
Now, on
3
top of
de
the second
janeiro
stage, you'll see that
de
large barrel
2024.
structure with a pointed nose. That is our payload fairing. It's composed of 2 halves, each made up of carbon fiber
Ele era para ter
composite
sido o
material.
último
As a
lançamento do
whole,
ano,
the fairing
mas
protects our
acabou
satellites
ficando
until we're
para
in
a
the
China.
vacuum of space.
A China
Around 3
ganhou da
minutes into flight,
SpaceX aí
once
com
we've
o
exited
último
the
lançamento do
atmosphere,
ano.
we will jettison the fairing halves and attempt to retrieve them once they return to Earth. We want to jettison those fairings as soon as we can because the weight of the fairings actually decrease second stage performance.
A SpaceX faria 100 lançamentos
the payload fairing is about 40 feet tall with a 17-foot diameter. So to put that size into perspective, an average fire truck is about 40 feet long and 12 feet wide. So a fire truck would just fill up our payload fairing. As the fairing halves return to Earth, so will our first stage, which is set to land on our drone ship. Of course, I Still Love You, and you can see it there on your screen, stationed out in the Pacific Ocean. Overall, SpaceX has reflown 231 boosters, but tonight our
tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
Tonight our rocket will be making its first flight to space.
Do Falcon 9.
Now, for those of you who follow along, you'll already know that we typically end our Starlink webcasts following first stage landing and confirmation of a successful MVAC shutdown. Now, for updates on deployment, be sure to check out @SpaceX on X. Now, at this time, as we mentioned before, weather is about 70% chance of go. We have been watching the weather with some wind speeds and cumulus cloud rules. However, we are go for launch at this point in time. And as for the range is green and they are ready to support liftoff. Just 4 minutes and 10 seconds, almost 10 seconds from now. We can actually see those clamp arms under the fairing have just opened. That's in preparation for strong back traction. The strong back is also referred to as the TE or transporter erector. That's the large structure that you see there next to Falcon 9. It's now moving away by a couple degrees from the vehicle.
Aqui a gente não só transmite os lançamentos, como também temos conteúdo de matemática, programação em Python, e também as caminhadas espaciais, né, pelo lado russo e pelo lado americano na Estação Espacial Internacional. Tudo na íntegra para vocês
And the next milestone coming up once the TE is completely reclined
também temos canal na Twitch, né?
Will be at T-3 minutes. That will be liquid oxygen loading complete on the first stage. We are continuing to load LOX on the second stage as well, and that will wrap up at the T-2 minute mark. And once we hit that mark, that will complete propellant loading on Falcon 9 altogether. So just a few seconds away from LOX loading complete on stage 1.
3 minutos para o lançamento.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Estágio com abastecimento concluído.
Stage 1 Pogo.
LOX loading is complete on the first stage vehicle. That means that the first stage is fully loaded with RP1 and liquid oxygen. And again, we are awaiting liquid oxygen loading completion on the second stage, again, which will wrap up at the T-2 minute mark.
Com a vaquinha do nosso canal aí para poder comprar, né, adquirir então um PC novo. Para poder então fazer as transmissões em conjunto Twitch.
Now that LOX load is complete on the first stage, we will start to see some of those white clouds form around the vehicle. We'll see more of that occur after LOX load completes in about 20 seconds on the second stage. Totally normal. That's just liquid oxygen venting from the lines in the TE. Looking like that second stage LOX load should be wrapping up in just a couple of seconds.
2 minutos para o lançamento. Nesse momento, então, estamos aguardando a confirmação do abastecimento total do Falcon 9.
As we said before, weather has been a watch item leading up to tonight's launch, but as of right now, we are still go for launch on the weather front. Everything continues nominally with our countdown so far for an on-time launch.
Stage 2 LOX load is
Estágio 2 com abastecimento concluído, Falcon 9 100% abastecido.
Letting us know that Falcon Stage 2 LOX load is complete. So at this point in time, Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with all of its propellants,
43 minutos pelo horário de Brasília.
Fuel and oxygen.
Lembrando que aqui também vocês acompanham com o áudio da transmissão sempre.
A few seconds, we'll hear a call out that Falcon 9 is in startup. That means that the onboard flight computers have taken over the launch countdown.
Estamos aí então com o minuto final. Falcon 9 está nesse momento no modo automático de lançamento.
Right now, Stage 1 and Stage 2 are beginning to pressurize to their final pressure prior to launch.
50 segundos.
LD is go for launch.
Falcon 9 liberado para o lançamento. Hoje vai. 40 segundos.
From our launch director. So at this point in time, at T-minus 35 seconds, all systems are go for liftoff of Falcon 9 with our Starlink satellites,
30 segundos.
including our first 6 direct-to-cell satellites. Let's listen in on the final count.
20 segundos. 15 segundos. E agora vamos entrar para a contagem final regressiva em 10.
T-10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ignição. E lançou aos 44 minutos no horário de Brasília, lançou o Falcon 9 com 21 satélites Starlink Vandenberg na Califórnia.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
At T plus 33 seconds, you are watching Falcon 9 accelerate our Starlink satellites out into space. We are throttling down our engines on the first stage vehicle, and that is in preparation for Max Q.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Good call-outs there. Max Q is the largest amount of stresses that the vehicle sees on ascent, so we do slow the vehicle down just a little bit in preparation for passing through Max Q. And that should be coming up.
Supersonic.
Estamos em supersônico.
In just under 10 seconds.
E Max Q.
Max Q.
Great news, we have passed through Max Q.
Próximo evento então da nossa missão é o momento então do MICO, onde teremos 3 eventos em um só: desligamento do primeiro estágio, separação e ignição do estágio 2. E logo depois a abertura da coifa, né, com a fairing.
All right, we're a minute and a half into.
MVAC engine chill has started.
That call there tells us that the engine on the second stage, that MVAC,
Até o momento, então,
has
aí
begun to
corre
flow
tudo
some
bem
super
aí com
chilled
a
liquid
missão de hoje
oxygen
do
through the
Falcon 9.
engine to begin
Primeira
to bring
missão
that
aí
hardware
da
down,
Spacex
down in temperature.
no ano de
We're less than a
2024.
minute away from main engine cutoff, stage separation, second engine start. Those all happen really quickly, so don't blink. After that, we will jettison the fairings. At this point in time, the first stage is experiencing about 3.3 Gs. Beautiful view there on your screen of the vehicle as it's just lifted off from Vandenberg Space Force Base. It's now able to see that plume beginning to deplete as we are preparing for main engine cutoff.
MICO.
Main engine cutoff. Stage separation confirmed.
Separação do estágio 1 com o estágio 2.
There on your screen, successful
e ignição do estágio 2.
There on your right-hand side. And before that, we had first stage engine shutdown and stage separation. We can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, the first stage grid fins starting to deploy. Those help steer the booster back to its precise landing.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Abertura da coifa.
As you heard and just saw, successful fairing separation. That marks the 9th flight for one of those fairing halves and the 11th flight for the other. We, of course, will attempt to recover those fairing halves again to use on a future flight.
Dentro de 6 minutos, então, dentro de 3 minutos, teremos aí a reentrada do primeiro estágio. Estamos aí acompanhando a missão Starlink, número 131, do grupo 79.
T plus 3 minutes and 48 seconds
lançamento, então,
into
foi
flight,
realizado
and right
com
now you
sucesso aos
are
44
looking at a view
do
from
dia
the
3
second
de
stage
janeiro
vehicle,
de
looking at our
2024,
MVAC engine,
aí na
glowing
base
very
em
brightly there.
Vandenberg,
The first
na
stage is
Califórnia.
making its
4
way back
minutos.
down to Earth right now, and it does take 2 burns to make its way back down to our drone ship, which is, of course, I Still Love You for tonight's scheduled landing. Those two burns coming up will be the entry burn, which is just about a couple minutes away from now, followed by the landing burn. The entry burn is where we reignite 3 of the 9 M1D engines on the vehicle, and that helps slow the stage down as it's re-entering back into the Earth's atmosphere. Then once we shut down those engines to conclude the entry burn, the atmosphere actually scrubs most of the velocity as it's making its way back to its landing zone. And then we use one final burn, a single engine burn. The center E9 engine will reignite, and that will help to slow the vehicle down just in time to touch down for landing. Again, the entry burn on the first stage is coming up in a little over a minute from now.
Então lembra que o primeiro lançamento do ano de 2024 foi realizado então pela Índia.
You could see the telemetry of the stage 1 vehicle, so you could see its speed and altitude. And for the second stage vehicle, on your right hand, the right bottom corner of your screen is where you can see the telemetry for stage 2. We're about 1 minute away from the entry burn on the first stage vehicle.
Vehicle's following a nominal trajectory.
And good callouts there. Both first stage and second stage are following nominal trajectories. Today's mission marks SpaceX's 296th overall launch, and it is the first of 2024.
Dentro de mais alguns instantes, aí teremos então a
Again, it is carrying our Starlink satellites for this mission, including our first 6 direct-to-cell satellites. Now that entry burn on the first stage is coming up in just under 20 seconds.
Estágio 2. 6 minutos.
There you can see on your left-hand screen is a view from the first stage.
Entry burn startup.
Reentrada iniciada.
Good timing. We heard that call out, and now you can see on your screen those engines have relit on the first stage vehicle. This is just about a 20-second burn.
Stage 1 entry burn.
Reentrada concluída.
There we heard that call out, as well as you could see that the engines have shut down on the first stage vehicle. That concludes the entry burn, the first of 2 burns that the first stage requires to make its way back to landing. The next burn is the landing burn coming up in
7 minutos.
Just about a minute and a half.
Estamos a 171 quilômetros de altitude com estágio 2. Próxima etapa então do nosso voo será aí o procedimento então de início de pouso para o primeiro estágio. Lembrando que este é o voo de estreia deste primeiro estágio.
It actually
do
kept
Falcon
increasing in altitude until about 4.5 minutes, T plus 4.5 minutes. As we can see, it's getting closer and closer. We are targeting a landing on our drone ship just to read the
52 minutos no horário de Brasília.
Excuse me, of course, I still love you. And there we just heard the call out that the first stage is transonic, telling us that it is traveling near the speed of sound. Now only 6 kilometers above the ocean. So in about 12 seconds, we should see that landing burn ignite.
8 minutos.
That's a 1-engine burn designed to...
landing burn.
Lembrando que logo mais à noite, então, a partir das 19h45, teremos Missão Oswald 3.
The first stage has lit 1 engine to prepare for landing.
Stage 2 FTS has saved.
We're targeting a landing on our drone ship, which you there see there now. Of course, I still love you.
E aí, portanto, pouso aos 53 minutos no horário de Brasília. Aí tivemos então aí o pouso confirmado com o primeiro voo deste primeiro estágio do Falcon 9. Primeiro voo então aí completado com sucesso aí do ano de 2024 pela SpaceX, a missão Starlink. Então, a SpaceX aí inaugurando aí a sua temporada
landing, we will
de
wrap up
lançamento.
today's launch coverage. Thank you so much
Aí,
for tuning
hoje.
in. We are thrilled to see our first direct-to-cell satellites launch to orbit today, the first of many that will enable an additional layer of connectivity in areas previously unreachable by traditional cellular networks. For updates on deployment, be sure to check us out at SpaceX on X.
A huge thank you to all of our direct-to-cell partners, and thank you to all of you, the viewers. We'll see you back here again soon tomorrow for our second launch of the year of the Ovzon 3 mission set to lift off from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida at 6:04 p.m. Eastern Time. Happy New Year, and we'll see you again soon.
Então é isso, pessoal. Estamos encerrando aqui também a nossa transmissão em nosso canal WillPTV. Agradecendo aí pelos likes, pelas inscrições, pelos donates. E nos vemos mais tarde, então a partir das 19h45 com a missão Oswald 3. Até mais.